Love You to Death, Stan Kraychik Mystery, Book 2. Writer Grant Michaels, publisher St. Martin's Press, New York, 1992. Narrator Eric Aust. Chapter 9, Charm School Dropouts. Early the next morning, I took Tobias to Nicole's place at Harbor Towers. Yes, I knew it was her day off and that she'd planned to spend it alone with Charles. I also knew that since I wasn't picking Tobias up as originally planned last night, I had no business there at all. But I had plans of my own that day, and they did not include dragging a young boy around with me. I had to convince Nicole to look after Tobias. I figured I'd tell her what Branko had said last night, embellishing it to make the threat of court action sound more immediate. On the way to the waterfront, I realized I was in a good mood, since I was noticing the beautiful side of a winter day in the city. Last night's storm had long passed, and all along Marlborough Street, the bare black-barked trees stood in high contrast to the blue sky and the new white snow. When we arrived at Nicole's neighborhood, even filthy Boston Harbor, the featured vista of the waterfront looked appealing in the clear early light. It was just after 8 o'clock, so I knew she and Charles would be home. Probably still in bed. Invading forces now know the advantage of surprising their quarry as it lies abed. The doorman recognized me with a friendly nod and let Tobias and me enter. It wouldn't have mattered if he hadn't, though. Nicky and I have keys to each other's pads. When I knocked on the door, Nicky answered it from behind. "Who's there?" "Me." She opened the door and saw Tobias and me. "You mean us," she said with a scowl. Tobias smiled charmingly. "Hi, Uncle Nick." "Sorry if we woke you, doll." "What is it?" she said drily coolly. "Can we come in?" She eyed Tobias and was already suspecting my motive, so my suffering Stanley act had to be convincing. Fortunately, from what I could hear in the background, Charles was already in the shower, so my timing was perfect. "Nicky, I'm in trouble. After last night's urban adventure with our little renegade," I glanced at Tobias, implying that he'd caused my latest dilemma, "Lieutenant Branko put me on probation. He says if anything like that happens again, the COURT will take action." "So what am I supposed to do?" "Nicky, you know how busy I can get at the shop, especially if you are not there to direct traffic." Nicole pondered a moment, then spoke. "Yes, Stanley, and it will be extra busy today since Leslie just called me." With extra emphasis, she added, "which is the only reason I'm up at this hour on my day off." "What did Leslie want?" "She won't be at the shop today." "Another fit of vapors?" "Her car couldn't start, and the snow and all." I'd heard that excuse plenty before. Whenever it displeased Leslie to drive into town during winter, her car conveniently didn't start, even though it was one of those Swedish jobs that claims to thrive under glaciers or inside icebergs. Leslie had a kind of let the city folk take care of it attitude toward discomfort or inconvenience, and I often wondered why Nicole kept her on, since she was so unreliable. Perhaps it was her genius with scissors. When Leslie is cutting, there's a maelstrom of flying hair and combs and clips. You almost can't see the customer for all the Brownian motion around the chair, but the results are consistently stunning. After all, she cuts my hair. Nicole said, "I'm afraid you're facing double duty today without Leslie or I to hold your hand." "Leslie or me, doll." But Leslie's unexpected absence would complicate my plan to take time off to make my personal rounds that day, and I didn't want to tell Nicky that. "That's all the more reason I need you to babysit, just for the morning, please." "Stanley, don't start again." "Nicky, you were going to take him last night. Just pretend you're doing me the favor now, a little later." Chaz and I have plans. Didn't you already do most of that? She frowned. I'm trying to be hospitable. I'd say he's had his share of the open door today. That's uncalled for. Nikki, I need your help now. Charles can have it any other time. I'll ask him. That stopped me. You're going to ask Charles if you can do me a favor? Without answering, she left Tobias and me standing in the foyer and headed up the stairway to her bedroom on the upper level of the apartment. I wandered with Tobias into the vast living room with its lowering floor and stratospheric ceiling. The entire room was basically the northeast corner of the building, and it provided an unimpeded view of the city and the open harbor. I could hear Nicole's and Charles's muffled voices from the open door of a bathroom in a faraway corner of the penthouse. Nicole returned and said lightly, Chaz thinks it is a better ideal for us to have Tobias this morning. A better ideal than what, doll? Is he afraid that I'll turn Tobias gay? The police shared with the same horror. Then again, cops and lawyers come from the same mold. Stanley, do you want me to take the boy or not? Yes, I do. We agreed that she'd bring Tobias to the shop after lunchtime. She and Charles would entertain him until then. I left them quickly without having coffee since I was supposed to open the shop. Actually, I just didn't want to see Charles all pink and clean and lean from his shower. I'm often uncomfortable when meeting my friends' bedmates, especially after they've been rutting like goats, and more especially if the bedmate is someone I don't care for. And most especially if he's cocksure and relentless about it. Somehow, it makes the couplings between friends and their sex pets seem tawdry. I guess I was feeling my old protectiveness for Nicole, that she deserved better than the conceited young lawyer she'd taken up with for the past few months. My only consolation was that her winter affairs never lasted beyond the first thaw of springtime, and that Charles, like the others, would probably not be a permanent fixture in our lives. On the way to Snip's salon, I once again felt the great relief of having Tobias off my back. I opened the shop and called the answering service at once. What a happy surprise to hear all of the out-of-towners counseling that day. All because of last night's storm. Even the winter weather seemed to be helping me, causing things to fall into place so that I'd be able to get away later without too much trouble. True, I'd make less money today, but I could make that up another time. Mid-morning, when local business started picking up slightly, a male client came in to see Leslie, the absent and snowbound stylist. I explained that she wasn't in today, but since I recognized him as a former customer who used to keep regular appointments, I offered to take care of him myself. He hesitated, then asked for the next best stylist after Leslie. I told him that I was the salon's lead stylist before Leslie. When I suggested that he might want to reschedule with her after all, he opted to have me do his hair. It was a good decision since it needed color work badly. The job was simple for a master. Apply perfectly mixed color to his longish brown and gray roots. The soft amber blonde would match the rest of the older color work, which had held up pretty well, considering all the time he'd let pass since his last visit. Leslie's expert cut had held up well too, except for 2 holes on either side of the man's head. Leslie couldn't have done anything so clumsy, and I wondered how the man's hair had got that way. As I sectioned the hair to apply color, I noticed a pair of small pink scars within the shorter hair, one diagonally forward above each ear and another behind each ear, just back of the occipital bone. Each scar was about an inch long. Recognizing their significance, I casually asked if he'd been on vacation, since he looked so rested, and I couldn't help adding, somewhat younger. He described in surgical detail the happy time he'd spent at a tropical oceanside resort. but he didn't admit to the beautifully executed facelift he'd recently had. By late morning, the place was humming with enough worker bees to handle the flow of local customers into the shop. I was booked too, but they were coincidentally all clients from my B list. The whiners and the lousy tippers. Seizing the moment, I relegated my bookings to Ramon, who was always eager to build his own clientele from the shampoo sink. The only drawback to letting Ramon work on my clients was that there'd be so much to undo after his work. We obviously didn't respond to the same muse. I headed out on the first leg of my fact-finding mission that day, a visit to Liz Carlini again. I didn't call first, hoping to catch her off guard. Lies are more difficult to hide when a person is on the defensive. Since Liz was a client, I found her unpublished address in the private directory. I keep on all my customers. She and Prentice lived in Chestnut Hill, so I took the Riverside train, which, even in winter, is one of the most dependable lines of Boston's MTA, an ancient and misnamed rapid transit system that supposedly links metropolitan Boston to its many suburbs. From the Chestnut Hill station, it was a short cab ride to their house. They lived in a small mansion, an oxymoron, I suppose, overwrought with pilasters and porticos. But in Chestnut Hill, you showed your wealth, not your taste. Nature helped today, though, with ice-glazed tree limbs and soft new snow. On the ground, the driveway and sidewalk had been meticulously cleared and were bone dry. Obviously, both pavements were heated. No nasty, noisy snowblowers for these folks, just flick a switch. I hoped someone would be home, since it was almost 11 o'clock. I stepped onto the portico and rang the bell, which caused a large dog to start barking inside. Reflexively, my body tightened. Dogs and me ain't the best of friends. They tend to bite me, even after the owner claims she never bites. Then seconds after Fido, or Fedina, has had a taste of my tender Slavic flesh, I hear the owner say, horrified, "She's never done that before." Luckily, both my skin and my nerve don't scar easily, but I still don't take naturally to dogs. Liz answered the door herself. She was fully dressed for the day, all perky and ready to face life squarely, which probably isn't too hard when you're wealthy. The big dog standing near her wagged its tail vigorously. While it sniffed and licked and nipped lightly at my hands, I instinctively pulled away. My hands are, after all, my livelihood. Liz seemed pleased to see me there. "Vanos, what a surprise. Is everything all right?" "Sure, Liz. Why not?" "Well, after that trouble the other night," she paused. "And, well, I'm just surprised to see you here in person. You've never been out here before, have you?" "That's true, Liz, and I apologize for not calling first, but I was riding the train this morning, you know. It's so rare we get a day like this in February, and I just thought I'd come by and see how you were doing, especially after that, trouble the other night." I purposely used her same words, a ploy to build trust, I hope. "I'm not intruding?" "Not at all. Come on in. I was just about to make myself another espresso. Would you like one?" "Sure. I love espresso." She led the way to the kitchen, and the big dog gamboled back and forth between us. Liz noticed me keeping my distance from the beast. "I'll put him outside if he's worrying you." "Thanks," I said. "Dogs like my blood." "Oh, he'd never bite," she said as she lit him out, but when Puppy Dog found himself outside without me, his anticipated mid-morning snack, he barked and squealed to be let back in, pawing and scratching against the sliding glass door. "Too bad, Pooch," I said, watching him from the safe side of the door. "No warm blood today." Liz's kitchen had been remodeled recently with expensive European appliances and cabinets, and I was happy to sense a feeling of use instead of just show. While Liz prepared the coffee, I gazed out over the spectacular backyard, though estate lawns might be a more correct description, As I turned back into the kitchen, I happened to notice, squeezed up between the cookbook shelf and the bottom of the overhead cabinets, the distinctively decorated sides of a lavender-colored box. The purple iris meant it was a box of La Jardin chocolate. After the murderous mishap the other night, I could understand why the box was tucked away, out of sight, out of mind. "Is Prentice home?" I asked. Liz clumsily dropped the coffee basket on the counter, spilling the fine dark grounds everywhere on the hand-glazed ceramic tiles. He's out now," she said shortly, and grimaced as she swept up the spilled coffee. "He had an important errand to run. Did you want me to talk to him?" "Well, yes. And to you, too. As I said, I just dropped by to say hello and find out how you were doing. The other night was pretty hard on all of us there. Sometimes it's helpful to share feelings with others after suffering a calamity together." I sounded like a recovery group facilitator. She nodded. "It's true, Venos. I've been thinking about it a lot." Then she said with a secretive look, "And I think I know who did it." "You do?" "I have a theory." It figures she would, with every other success in her life. Liz Carlini probably imagined herself a brilliant detective, too. She refilled the coffee basket and installed it into the espresso machine while she explained. "There's a woman who is the operations manager at the Gladys Gardner factory. Her name is Finney. Mary Finney." "I met her yesterday." "Oh." "I took my nephew on a tour of the factory." "Was it fun?" "Actually, we had a little trouble, and it was with Mary Finney." They really should get someone else to give the tours. "I'd have to agree with you there. But why do you think she's involved with the killing?" Liz ran the espresso machine. I watched the syrupy coffee flow into 2 small cups, and she placed under the dual spigot. I also noticed that she neglected to preheat the cups. After the machine stopped humming, she spoke again. "When Danny and I asked Lorette to manage the new La Jardin shop, Mary Finney objected noisily. In the entire history of Gladys's Gardner chocolates, there's never been a black person in the stores serving the customers, so for us at La Jardin, choosing Lorette was a breakthrough. Such is the political correctness of business savvy." "But how does that relate to the killing?" "I think Mary Finney planted that poison chocolate to incriminate Lorette, since she was the one who was setting up the truffles that night." "But then the killing would be random," I said. "I don't think Mary intended to kill anyone. She just wanted to make them sick. But as long as Lorette Cole was suspected and accused and didn't get that job, Mary Finney would be satisfied." "Liz, did you tell this to the police?" She shook her head. "It's just an idea. I have no proof." "Tell them anyway. Let them decide what to do." I figured if nothing else, maybe her far-fetched story would incite Branco to interrogate Mary Finney. "Make sure you talk to Lieutenant Branco, though. He's in charge." "Should I mention your name?" "Better not." She set out to steam some milk, but at one point she miscalculated the steam pressure and splashed scalding milk all over the countertop. "Damn!" she said, and then banged the small pitcher against the counter, spilling even more hot milk. Being a salon neatnik, I automatically went to the sink for a sponge to wipe up the spill. As I mopped up the milk, I asked, "Did you get burned?" "You don't have to be so helpful. We're not at your salon now." Her sudden bluntness stopped me. When she saw the effect her words had, she quickly changed her tone. "I'm sorry, Venos. It's only spilled milk." She breathed deeply for a few seconds and regained her composure. "There's a lot on my mind. I didn't mean to turn on you like that." "Sometimes I deserve it." No, I was wrong." Then she looked at me with needy eyes. "Actually, would you mind talking about something personal?" "If I can help." "Liz, sure. Our relationship doesn't begin and end at the sink. Devious Stanley at work." After I'd mopped up the milk, Liz steamed what was left on the small pitcher It was still a lousy job. The bubbles were coarse and the foam collapsed quickly. To finish it off, she'd sprinkled hot, not chocolate, but cinnamon on top. Ugh! And pushed one of the cups toward me. "I'm afraid it isn't very good today," she said apologetically. "When the emotions are askew, so is everything else." But troubled mind or not, I could tell she hadn't inherited the knack for making good Italian coffee. "Now tell me," I said, folding my hands in front of me and facing Liz Carlini with kindly, concerned eyes. "What's the problem?" She picked idly at her manicured nails for a moment. Then, realizing it was unprofessional behavior, she curled her thumbs and fingers into her palm, which I recognized as a classic defensive posture. "Prentice and I are having a disagreement," she said unsurely, using a euphemism even for the simple, direct word, fight. "What happened?" I asked, wondering how the overly refined Prentice Kingsley could be in conflict with anybody. "I think it's a result of what happened the other night." I thought nothing like a little death to show people's true colors. Liz went on, "I'm sure that we're both upset by that horrible incident at the party, but he insists it's something else." "What do you think it is?" She sipped some of her coffee, then made a sour face as though admitting how bad it was. She took a deep breath, looking me straight in the eyes, and said, "I know what it was. I just don't want to believe it. Prentice wants me to sell my share of La Jardin to the Gladys Gardner Corporation." "But I thought La Jardin was already part of the business." "Who told you that?" "Rafik mentioned it at the factory yesterday." Liz let out a professionally discreet giggle. "Rafik misled you." "How would he know anyway? He just drives the truck." "No, Venus, there's no physical connection whatsoever. Prentice did put up part of the money, but I raised the rest myself. La Jardin is privately owned by Prentice and me and Danny together." "Dan Dougherty is an owner?" Liz nodded. "He didn't contribute any money, but Prentice and I agreed that it would be fair to give him a share of the business." "That's very generous." "We thought so too, even though Danny's artistic contributions to La Jardin are almost priceless." "How is the business split?" Liz eyed me curiously. "That's not what's causing the problem." "Then what is?" "Danny and I worked hard together to make La Jardin happen. Danny once joked that it was like having a baby together." She blushed. "Sometimes it almost seemed true, but then as soon as the business was about to open officially, Prentice wanted me to give it up and sell it, as though the whole thing was an academic exercise. I'm supposed to relinquish it all now and become the devoted wife again." "And you don't want that?" "Of course not. I kept my own name for this marriage, and I'm certainly going to keep my own business alive too. La Jardin has potential for international growth. We've already had inquiries from 2 European distributors to sell our products over there." "That's a big-time stuff." "It's certainly not the kind of sophistication Gladys Gardner can handle." "Why can't you just continue on with your plans the way the company stands now, keeping it separate?" Liz shook her head no. "Prentice claims that Danny is willing to sell his share of the business to Gladys Gardner, which will leave me with a minority holding in La Jardin, basically. I'll be powerless to direct the course of the company." "I don't see why La Jardin has to be part of Gladys Gardner. What's the benefit?" "That's obvious, isn't it? If my husband Cummings owns my company, he regains his control over me, his chattel." "Liz, you don't mean that the other night I overheard Prentice saying how much he respected you and Danny for what you've done?" "Done, yes, but not doing. He wants everything back the way it was." "But won't Dan resist selling out, for artistic integrity and all?" Liz began a tiny cackle, then caught herself. "Danny did all that design work for La Jardin solely for the exposure. Beyond that, the business doesn't interest him. He'll sell out in a minute. He's already planning his next project, and he needs cash." "So much for your late baby." Liz flashed a horrified look at me. What do you mean? You said the business was like you and Dan having a baby together. Yes, that feeling is gone now, too. Our friendship has changed suddenly. Maybe when the trouble from the party all blows over. No, Vanessa, Prentice wanted me to sell La Jardin even before the party. As I said, once it became a reality, he wanted me to have nothing more to do with it. You have a contract, don't you? Lawyers? Of course, but I never thought I'd be facing the classic problem of a wife having to choose between her own life or her husband's demands. I should never have let Prentice get involved in this project. Why did you? Because he had the means and experience. It's not public knowledge, but La Jardin chocolates are actually made in the Gladys Gardner factory. I nodded. Rafik told me that, too. Liz gave me another suspicious glance. I know he's handsome, Renault's, but don't believe everything he says. We do have our own highly trained staff there, and they work exclusively on our products. It was just easier to start out using the existing facilities. Why reinvent the wheel, especially with the cost of tempering and molding equipment these days? But aren't the intentions behind the two companies different? Liz's smile told me I'd asked a naive question. Both businesses exist to make a profit. They're aimed at different markets, obviously, but the end result is the same: money. So simply stated, it was disturbing even the heavenly chocolates of La Jardin weren't so appealing now. Thanks again to my unfortunate streak of moral purity, the one that often limits and ruins a lot of life's experiences simply because of the monetary motives behind most enterprises. Where's your husband now? I asked. I don't know, she answered quickly. Too quickly. I thought, maybe you can help me with something else? Then Liz, I've been trying to find Dan Dougherty, but he's not in town. Do you know where he went? I already knew, but would she tell me? She shrugged. If he's not at the house, I don't think I can help. I absentmindedly twirled my coffee cup on the tile countertop. Has Stani ever been in your place in Abigail? What? I'm wondering just how close he is to you and your husband, she answered flatly. It's a friendly business arrangement. You said it was like having a baby. Danny said that, not me. Liz, I have it from two sources that Dan Dougherty is in Abigail as we speak. Is he staying at your summer house there? Did Rafik tell you that too? She asked with a playful toss of her hand. Liz Carlini seemed to be on the denial track, more concerned about the future of her carriage trade business than about her husband or the killing the other night. The time had come to tell her the facts of life and death. Liz, from what I've learned recently, it's probable that the poisoned chocolate from Sunday night was intended for your husband. Liz blanched. What do you mean? Laurette Cole told me that she switched the truffles at the last minute, and the one that killed Trek DeLorean was originally supposed to go to Prentice. I don't believe that. Liz shook her head angrily. Why are you telling me this? Because I think your husband is in danger, and in spite of this recent problem between the two of you, he needs your help. Liz picked up her nails again, but this time she didn't stop. Who would want to kill Prentice? Who? Tell me. That's what I'm trying to find out. Is that what the police think too? No, the police want to convict Laurette Cole and close the case. Meanwhile, someone is out there who wants to hurt your husband. This is absurd. You're really upset me, Venos. I'm sorry. Maybe you had better go now. But tell your husband? Just leave me, please. The tension in her voice was activating jaws and paws, the hungry mastiff who was barking loudly outside and scratching on the back door to be let back in. As Liz went to let him in, I headed quickly to the front door before he had the chance to taste my strong but tender thighs. Safely outside, I slid mostly, back down the Ivy Hill until I got to the busy intersection of Route 9, where I got the MTA back to town, but instead of getting off there, I stayed on and continued to North Station, where I could catch an afternoon train to Abigail by the sea. A Gay Mysteries audiobooks. I think it is easy to hate a label. but a face humanizes the word. So this effort is twofold: to offer comfort to those like myself that your world didn't end because you don't fit into the view of acceptable society on both sides, and in hopes of helping those with family that are LGBTQ, that it doesn't mean we are aliens from the child they once knew. Reassure them so they can maybe be supportive at the same time, being true to their values.